that the book was largely plagiarized from a French book, a liberal French book attacking the repression of the dictator Louis Napoleon III. Strange, this is not so unusual. Conspiracism is full of strange connections where one person takes from another, steals his ideas, turns them around. There's no quality control. The books wander off, say contradictory things, make declarations without supporting them. It's a very difficult world to analyze, because analysis is not what this is about. It's about feelings.
Is there any conspiracy that you believe in?
Well, certainly conspiracies do take place. And there are even conspiracies to take over the world. And here we get to an interesting point. The only real conspiracies, or almost only real conspiracies, are counter-conspiracies. In other words, if I'm a conspiracy theorist, I believe that this is a good way of operating, an effective way of operating. And therefore, I'm inclined to operate this way myself. And that's precisely what you find. Take Hitler. He believed in a Jewish conspiracy to take over the world. What he did to counter that alleged Jewish conspiracy was to create a real conspiracy, the Nazi Party. And he apparently took a number of ideas from the alleged Jewish conspiracy and made them part of his Nazi movement. And the Nazi movement was an attempt to take over the world. Take Lenin. He believed in a business conspiracy, a conspiracy of business interests to dominate the world, to extract, steal goods at cheap or for free. For the same reason, because he believed in conspiracy, he himself organized a conspiracy, the Social Democratic Party in Russia, which, in fact, took over Russian government and was an attempt to take over the world. So over and over again, I find that the conspiracy theorist becomes himself a conspirator. And that in most cases, the real conspiracy, the one that actually takes place, follows from the actions, the mind of a conspiracy theorist. So there's a circle. And so my policy conclusion from this is, when you hear a conspiracy theory being alleged, watch out for the conspiracy. Look around carefully.
By the way, where are you now?
I'm in Philadelphia.
Doing what?
I'm editor of a journal called the Middle East Quarterly and director of a small think tank that houses that quarterly.
What's the name of the think tank?
Middle East Forum.
Why is it in Philadelphia?
Just because I landed there, previous job, and been there now for some 12 years.
And how big an operation do you have?
It's quite small. We put out a journal and do some research, but it's small by Washington standards.
And where have you been in your professional life?
I've taught at Harvard and at the University of Chicago, at the Naval War College. I've worked in the State Department and been head of a think tank, and now I'm editor of the journal.
And what did you do in what State Department?
I was in the Reagan State Department, and I was in a couple of positions, policy planning and other positions, mostly having to do with the Middle East.
Did you say your mother and father both came over from Poland?
That's right.
What year?
Mother in 1940 and father in 1941.
What was the reason?
Escaping the Nazis.
Does that have any impact on you and why you're doing all this?
Well, I'm sure it has some impact, but not directly. I mean, as I said before, the direct reason was trying to understand the politics of the Middle East today. And one thing led to another, and I ended up in this topic, which in a way is familiar because it's intellectual history of Europe, which is a favorite topic of mine. But I'm sure I'm influenced by other factors as well.
You have a family?
Yes, I do.
Kids?
Yes,
how many?
Two girls, 12 and 10.
What's your wife do?
She is working at the University of Pennsylvania.
Teaching?
Working at the hospital.
Council on Foreign Relations, Trilateralists, Federal Reserve, international bankers. I just wrote that down reading through this. We hear a lot about that on this network from callers. They think there is, in all this, one-worlders, they run the world. What do you think?
I think that these are organizations that are not terribly strong, not terribly powerful, that these are organizations of like-minded people's social affinities, and get together and talk about the things that interest them. One of the key characteristics of a conspiracy theorist is he confuses the powerful and the powerless. The Soviet Union Nazi Germany, he'll say, well, they're not really all that powerful. Never mind that these are enormously influential, powerful, totalitarian states with huge armies and arsenals. The Council of Foreign Relations, which is a group of like-minded people who meet together and have study groups and listen to talks, is deemed an all-powerful organization. The United Nations, which can barely scrape together a budget from year to year, is deemed all-powerful. It's a typical mistake of the conspiracy theorists. Things are not what they seem to be. Therefore, the weak is really the powerful is really the weak. It's a very consistent mistake.
Have you ever been a member of the Council on Foreign Relations?
I am indeed, yes. Member of good standing. And some of the talk shows I've been on, I've been accused of being a one-worldist and being employed by them, in effect, to make people unaware of the real conspiracy. All I can say is that my salary is not being paid by them. And that's the key point here. The Council on Foreign Relations has no influence over its members.
But you know, people right now are saying, aha,
yeah, right.
We got this guy, we know where he's coming from.
Well, but I had to apply to become a member. I had to have a few friends vouch for me that I'm someone they want to have. They decided I was someone they wanted to have. How does that mean, where is the influence over me? In other words,
well,
there's no control.
Let me take you through it. You all are of like minds. You all meet. How often do you meet?
No, we're not of like minds. We're very different minds. I mean, the majority of the members, I'd say, are liberal. I'm conservative. I work for Reagan. There are major debates. It's a group of some 2,000 plus people who are interested in foreign affairs, from the world of business, universities, think tanks.
But the theory is you belong to the same organization, you come in and out of government, you all go to the same clubs, all eat at the same restaurants, eventually wink at each other, write each other's contracts.
Well, that is the theory, but it also goes beyond that, that the council actually can make or break your career. And so that I, as a member, must do what the council tells me to say. Well, let's just start with the power. That's the power nexus. I mean, where is the power nexus? I pay $210 a year to be a member of the council, and I have some free dinners, and I get a free subscription to Foreign Affairs, and I go there once in a while for talks. But there's no power nexus here. It's just like joining any other club.
Why do you belong anyway?
Because it's a nice organization to belong to, and it is a good place to meet people, and it is somewhat prestigious. And the council's been good to me. I was a fellow there for a while, and I've met lots of interesting people there, but it's not a key to my life.
How about the Freemasons?
Yes, Freemasons are another source.
What are they? Are they still active? What's the conspiracy theory around them?
Another major source of conspiracy theories. Freemasons, their origins are somewhat murky, but they go back to about 1720 as an organized group in London. They, in England and in the United States, by and large remain quite a tame organization in terms of their rituals and their proclamations. But in the continent, France and Germany especially, they came up with all sorts of wild permutations. And already in the 1760s, 70s, there were lots of fears that the Masons, who were, again, a social group, but at that time quite a distinct one, because in the 18th century, there were very few opportunities for people of different social backgrounds to get together and talk about public issues. And Masonic lodges were a place where they could do it.
But what kind of work did you have to do to get into them, or what?
You had to be a respectable member of society, male, and non-Jewish, by the way.
What about Catholic?
Catholics were welcome, but were not, by and large, allowed by the church. The church very much discouraged it. It's basically a Protestant organization, flourished in the Protestant countries, by and large, though not exclusively. And it had a function, had a real function then. Today it doesn't have all that much of a function. There's so many places for people to meet. But because of the extravagant qualities of the Masonic lore, the suspicious, the conspiracy-minded said, here is the source of power. And from the late 18th century, 2 centuries ago, 200 years ago, until today, this is one of those themes that keeps getting repeated and repeated and repeated. There are other organizations which are even more obscure. The Illuminati existed for 8 years, from 1776 to 1784. Interesting and relatively influential group in its small way.
Only 8 years
Only 8
in
years.
history.
And it remains the bogeyman of so many of the conspiracy theorists who are determined to find that it has a presence and an influence even today.
Where was it from?
It was in Germany, in southern Germany, and it was founded by a, let's say, militant secularist, and someone who came out of the Masonic tradition. And he had grandiose ambitions for his Illuminati organization, but the state repressed it and it was gone.
What does Illuminati mean?
Enlightened, illuminated. The real turning point was the French Revolution. The French Revolution was the greatest event hitherto in human history. It was huge, and it was chaotic. In retrospect, today we look back on it and understand it as the result of many conflicting forces, and clearly no one planned it out. It happened. It followed its own trajectory, its own logic. But at the time, the opponents of this event, of this transformation of French life, believed that there had to be an explanation, a rational, step-by-step explanation. That chaos, they had no place in their interpretation of chaos. And a significant number of them said, well, the French Revolution was planned in advance by the Illuminati, the Masons, the Jacobins, and others. And they planned it out step by step. And it's the legacy of that interpretation. And the books, one book in French, one book in English, came out almost exactly 20 years ago, that we're now still reeling from. They created, they memorialized and put on paper these ideas. And as I said before, the best illustration would be Pat Robertson's 1991 book, which is a regurgitation of these 1790s ideas. They're modernized, of course, the examples have changed, but the themes and even the perceived enemies are to a very great extent the same ones. The ideas don't go away. And I like to compare it to astrology, because in astrology there's a vast literature, and it's all very reasonable and logical if you accept the premise. The premise being that the alignment of the stars when you're born are going to affect your temperament and your life. Accept that premise, everything else makes sense. Here you've got to accept the premise that nothing is as it seems to be. You've got to accept the notion that there's some force out there that's working against you. And if you accept that, then all the rest of it is perfectly sensible. But the problem is the premise.
The world's most important conspiracy theorist was?
Clearly, the most important conspiracy theorist was the French abbot who interpreted the French Revolution as a conspiracy. He goes by the name of the abbot of Abbé de Baruel, abbot of Baruel. And he wrote a big book, 4 volumes, had a major impact, sensation, translated into some 18, 20 languages.
What year?
Bestseller, 1797, 98.
Have you read it?
Oh, I've read in it. I can't say I've read the whole thing. It's vast.
And why is he the world's most important conspiracy theorist?
I see him as roughly analogous to von Clausewitz in strategic issues or Adam Smith in economic studies. He's the original writer, the one who developed the field, the one who gave, in some ways, the most brilliant analysis that has never been superseded. And so with de Baruel, he came up with a vision of conspiracy that was profound and captivated many people. Now, interestingly, his interpretation of the French Revolution was purely secret society, no Jews. But after he wrote the book, some years later, he also started dabbling in anti-Semitism. And he is, in a sense, also the originator of the anti-Jewish conspiracy theories. So both traditions, the two traditions, both go back to him. And I'd like to note that those two traditions are very strong, and they exclude virtually everyone else. You don't find an anti-German conspiracy theory, an anti-Russian, an anti-Vatican, an anti-Japanese, an anti-Chinese, an anti-Islamic, an anti-Hindu. They just don't exist. Oh, once in a while someone will say something. But as a constituted tradition that goes back decades, if not centuries, they don't exist. It's Jews and then Israel. It's secret societies, Templars, Masons, Illuminati. Then that turns into the British and American governments. So it's these 5 actors: Jews, Israel, secret societies, British and American governments, who keep on coming up as the conspirator.
You say there are only 3 countries that suspect